Greg McKeown, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Cal, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
This is so much fun for me. I have my copy of Essentialism here in front of me. It's all highlighted. It's been such a wonderful read. I first want to just publicly thank you for writing the book. And in fact, as I was reflecting before this interview, I was thinking about you helped me identify what I call my 3 R's, and that is essential things for me, and they all happen to start with an R, and that is that reading is absolutely essential for me. And that involves also reading the scriptures. It's just a habit that I find that if I do that, man, I'm just so much healthier. I'm a better husband, better father, better leader, all those things. The other R is running, exercise, some form of exercise. That is absolutely essential to me. And then the other R is reflection, and that also involves prayer and just thinking and processing life. So it's neat as we have this conversation today, just how much this has personally impacted me. So thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate it.
Well, first of all, I just love that. I mean, I love that you simplified it to those 3 things, something I was just writing about. I'm working on a new book, finally.
All right.
And there's a chapter that I'm trying to put down, and it's a really simple idea, and it's like priority circles. What people typically do, and then what I think an essentialist does. So what people seem to typically do is they put other at the center of 3 concentric circles. That's all just living in their inbox. It's surfing social media. It's reacting. It's even many projects out there. It could be good projects, but they start with that stuff.
Yeah.
And so then whatever's left over is the second ring, is their family and most important relationships. And that's often short shrift because there's not much left over. And then in just the tiniest circle, the final circle, is the protect the asset activities. And because they're left right to the end, there's often nothing left. And if there is anything, it becomes quite mindless. Like someone who just told me that instead of going to sleep at midnight, she'll spend another couple of hours looking at Zillow properties and almost purchasing properties she has no business of purchasing, that sort of thing. Now that's the non-essentialist way of doing it, but the essentialist approach is just to reverse it. Protect the asset is first. That's the core. And then secondly, you're investing in family, and you're able to do that better because you're investing in your own spiritual, physical, asset first of all. And then the third circle is other, where we get to contribute to meaningful projects, and we're better able to discern what those are and to put good boundaries on them because we have invested in our own asset first, the family culture asset second, and then moving into those projects. So I think it's a very simple idea, but switching one for the other is, I think, critical. And what you just said is an illustration of it.
Yeah, and I think what you just described too highlights why essentialism is so important, because the life of the non-essentialist is unsustainable. I think it's something that we think we can do for a little while, but in order to live a healthy life, and I love how in the book you talk about to make our highest contribution, we have to figure out what is truly essential. Can you define for us, Greg, what essentialism is for those that aren't familiar with the book?
It's the perpetual, continual, disciplined pursuit of what's essential instead of the undisciplined pursuit of the non-essential. So it really means exploring more options than a non-essentialist will, because you're looking really broadly in pursuit of the right answer, the thing that really, really matters amidst the trivial many. Number 2, it means then once you've found it, eliminating as much of the non-essential as is humanly possible. And then finally, it means building a system that helps you to execute on what matters most. And ideally, it's a system that makes it easy rather than one that you're constantly fighting and battling against. So instead of trying to push your essential boulder up the hill, you've constructed a system that allows you, to push a boulder down a hill, which of course, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and you do that.
That's essentialism in a nutshell.
And you do a great job in the book of going through those steps. It's not just about identifying, okay, what's truly important, what's not important, how to eliminate, and then how do we make this practical? How do we get to doing this? And it's also, I think, important. You point this out in the book. It's not a once a year thing. It's not a maybe once a week. It's really every time we have to make a decision. And Greg, can you tell us your journey? How did you begin to explore essentialism? How did you decide to write this book? Where did that begin for you?
Well, look, it's I often think that there's no real stuff, no real thing. Failure is not a real thing. You can either succeed at something or you can learn from something. Right? Failure is not a thing, but so I learned my way to essentialism. One of the experiences that was formative for me was when I got an email from my boss at the time. Said, look, Friday between 1 and 2 would be a bad time for your wife to have a baby because I want you to be at this client meeting. And really, everything that follows is just me not taking ownership of that moment and saying, okay, well, no, that's not going to be the priority. I'm going to be clear. And so I was just trying to straddle it. Look, okay, my wife goes into labor Thursday night. We're in the hospital. The daughter's born early morning, Friday morning. And instead of just being able to be free of all of it and all the external pressure, I was holding on to that, worried about that, and trying to keep everybody happy. And how can I go to the meeting? And will that be a problem for Anna? And will that be a problem for, and the whole thing. And then, so to my shame, I do go to the meeting, leave my hours-old baby, and I'm there. And I remember afterwards, my boss said, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And maybe that's true. Maybe they did, although the look on their faces didn't evince that sort of confidence for me. But I mean, it's clear I made a fool's bargain. I violated something more important for something less important. And what I learned from the lesson, from that experience, was if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will, or something else will. And so it began this journey, not just to make sure that my life was in alignment with my highest priority, but also that to discover why other people struggle with this. And so it's been this multi-year journey. It's been this tremendous adventure to be able to maybe help a couple of people to really think through what matters and how they could get their life to be aligned to those things.
How much longer after that experience did you write the book?
Well, by the time the actual book was written, I mean, it was a good while later. It wasn't like a month later. I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm going to do it. But when it came time to try and work out what the book would be about, that I realized was a key moment in spawning it.
And when you think about essentialism, do you think about it individually and also organizationally? I know you work with a lot of giant tech companies.
Well, you make it's an important part of the story because I was working with companies in Silicon Valley at the time. And so what I noticed there was a pattern that they were going through. These small companies or organizations would, in the early days, were very focused on just a few things that led to success. And that success breeded options and opportunities, which of course all sounds like the right problem to have, but it does in fact turn out to be a problem if it leads to what Jim Collins has called the undisciplined pursuit of more. And so, this paradox of success that I was observing the organization on team level, I also then just observed as a personal thing. And I realized, well, look, this isn't a business question. This is a human question. And as I've gone on to research this and then work with organizations, now all over the world, I've observed that, people know this pattern, even if they haven't put words on it. And once you can put words on it, once you can label it, you can avoid some of the highest costs of non-essentialism, of trying to do everything for everyone without really thinking about it. You can start to choose a different way of doing life and doing leadership. The default path of even successful, driven, capable people is to feel busy but not productive, stretched too thin at work or at home, and feeling like your day is being hijacked by other people's agenda for you. And so the alternative path, the different choice is to live life as an essentialist and to do it before you have to. Right now, the whole world is sort of involuntarily essentialist.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the next best thing. If you know, because at least somebody has to really ask the question, you know, what matters? What really matters? When I don't have all of the options available, which things should I do? When I'm having to transform my team, my organization, you know, even my own family, when I'm having to transform all of that, I have to reprioritize. So it is a good opportunity for us to, you know, individually and as leaders, figure out what the priority is now. But even in good times or in you know, exceptionally bounteous times, you know, essentialism can be something you choose voluntarily even then, and to great advantage.
Have you been talking to people during this COVID-19 period as we're recording about essentialism? I'm curious, what are they saying? Are people more open to it now than perhaps they have been before, or are people identifying things they didn't see before?
Yeah, I mean, really, look, my sense is that like the whole world, I mean, I've never seen anything like it, really, right? Like the whole world is being confronted with effectively the question I posed in Essentialism, right? Like, what is essential?
So true.
Right? Like, I mean, literally, like almost the whole world is discussing this.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a global timeout. Right? You know, like you all just go to your rooms and have a think about it.
Yeah.
And in that is, of course, a challenge, and that challenge is affecting different people in different ways, some immensely acutely, some barely feeling it, but everybody is still affected by it. And the opportunity is that, you know, while we had the Great Depression and the Great Recession, this can be the Great Reset. In some ways, I think it already is. It's not even just a question mark. Well, in the future, what will happen? It already is something that, I mean, there was just a YouGov poll in the UK that said that only 9% of people want to go back to the way things were before.
Wow.
So even if you don't know what the future will be, and even if, you know, there are challenges ahead, it's already a reset. For someone to even discover that, for someone to even think about it, my goodness, some things are a lot harder than they were before, but some things are a lot better than they were before. You know, we like going out. I mean, in our neighborhood, we see them all the time now. Families walking past. You never used to see it before.
Same.
Families going on a bike ride. And I just got some of our bikes fixed on Saturday, and the notice at the bike shop that I normally go to has a notice that there's 3x the demand for biking.
Wow.
You know, fixing new bikes, everything. 3x over the last 2 months. And I talked to somebody when I went in, and he said, no one in the biking industry predicted this. We didn't know this is what was going to happen. So there's been, I mean, really, as I say, it's not just even a future possibility. There is a great reset that's happened. The question we have to ask as leaders of our own lives and of our teams is what will we create now? And how can we make sure that what we create now is essential, is really important, really matters, rather than just, you know, I guess trying to get back to some former state that I personally think is never coming again. We're not going to go back to something.
And Greg, what do you say to that person that maybe like me is seeing life with fresh eyes right now? I'm being forced to see all the busyness that I had before this happened. I'm seeing, I'll be honest, things I missed out on with my daughter when I was too busy at work. Now we're going in the back and hiking and looking for 4-leaf clovers and all the just those precious moments of life that I will never regret, and I will always cherish them. What do you say to someone like me or the many people out there that are seeing things and they want things to be different, but things are going to get busy again? What would you say to them? What advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, first of all, just well done to people. You know, they're people are. I've seen many evidences of people making good and positive choices in this situation, and talking about that. And in the essentialist community, where I spend a lot of my time professionally talking with people, I hear this feedback a lot, that there is a lot of good in this experience, and they're taking advantage of that. And I think that because we've had a collective experience, we, I know it's not the same, but if you compare it to other great societal shifts that have happened before, the great wars, these, when people have been through, or the Great Depression, when people have gone through these experiences, they come out changed. But in a way, it'd be very abnormal to come out the same. And so I think we will all have a shorthand forever where we go, yeah, I remember what it was like then. And so we'll always have something to be able to go back to and celebrate, and to try to design our lives differently. So I think that's what I would say. I would say, well done to people. And you can build on this. You can build on these successes and build a self-sustaining, positive, upward cycle around essentialism if you'll celebrate the successes you're having right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I would recommend reading the book Essentialism, because it does give a great framework. Greg, why do we have this tendency towards the non-essentialist lifestyle? What are the whys behind that and the reasons behind that, in your view?
I think there's a couple that are relevant here. I mean, one is that success paradox that I noticed working with organizations has become societal. So we live still, even right now as we're doing this recording, in the most extraordinary time in human history, right? Like, I wouldn't choose to live in any time or any place but here and now. Not in the whole of human history, not back a few months ago, not back a few decades ago, not hundreds of years ago. This is the best time, the best, the most democratic time, in terms of just like real democracy and freedom, the healthiest time, the most educated time. I mean, like, you are more likely to live a whole and healthy and free life today than in any time in human history. Okay, that's the good news, and we ought to remember it, maybe a little better than we do sometimes. But also, we've got to realize that what comes with that are success traps. As a friend of mine puts it to me, I think so well, he said, success traps can be harder to get out of than failure traps. So with a failure trap, at least you're incentivized to change, but with a success trap, you're incentivized to carry on and just do more and more of what you're doing or been doing. And so you start to plateau. And what that looks like, of course, is that what it means is the internet happened, hyperconnectivity happened, social interaction with social media happened, and all of those forces can be tremendously good. They're very powerful tools, but they can be so powerful that they can make us the tool, and we become the servant of it. And so as this massive expansion of choices has happened, individuals who are not choosing to become more selective will be completely overwhelmed by this tidal wave of options and choices. That's not something to bemoan, but it's not something to be blind to either. And for many of us who have basically grown up in this reality, it's invisible. And so we really need to discover it. We need to be aware, this isn't really the normal state of all civilizations. It's just as our norm. And so therefore we have got to be careful. It's all good things, but or I can say it this way, maybe they're first world problems, but that doesn't make them less problems. So we have to become, as all these options and success of society and chances and the learning and everything have just expanded massively, not a little, not incrementally, exponentially, where you can learn anything now, anything, absolutely anything, and almost for free. And that has just simply never existed in the course of humanity. You can go back and read John Adams and these extraordinary founding fathers that I've spent a decent amount of time doing, and I mean the emphasis they put on being able to buy books is great, is an evidence of success, because it's so hard to come by them, it's so expensive and so not available to everybody. And now it is, all of them, all of this literature is available. All the books they paid so much for, we can get for free. In that change in the human condition, we have to somehow change our selectivity so that we make sure that we actually take advantage of the best of that and don't just become a pawn in the whole story and be battered about by non-essential options that the internet and social media will also provide, an infinite pool of options for us.
I think one of the things that I've struggled with the most, Greg, is the social pressure to say yes. And that might just be my personality. My wife has helped me with that over the years. I remember we were living in Hawaii and I got invited to go surfing. This was very early in our marriage. And I didn't even think about it. I was like, of course I'm going to go surfing. This is with friends. And we were probably in our first year. And I remember her kind of asking a question that hinted at, like, maybe you should think about the fact that you could say no to these people.
Yes.
And it was a light bulb moment for me it was like, wow, you're right. I could say no. I'm not very good at saying no, but she's really helped me. And I think her personality is just a little bit better at being willing to say no. But do you find too that so often we attach the relationship or we're worried about the pressure? What's that going to mean if I say no to my boss or if I say no to a friend? What is that going to mean for the relationship?
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, look, I totally advocate saying no to non-essentials. But let's explore it a bit. First, I don't advocate saying no to everyone and everything without really thinking about it. That would be a different book altogether, right? That'd be a book called Noism. And I wrote Essentialism. So the key is to say yes to what is most essential and to say no where you have the direct power to do that, the control to do that. I can say no to mindless checking email and social media late at night, right? I have the power to do that. I can choose to not have my phone in my bedroom. I can have it somewhere else, so it's not the first thing that you pick up on in the morning and are just attached to all day long. Those things are within my sphere of influence. I can just do that. And all the time, the point is to say no to the non-essential stuff, not just to say no to stuff. As you move into relationships, of course, you also move into the world of influence and negotiation rather than simply saying no. Saying no isn't going to work in all sorts of scenarios, I assume, in the military. You don't just say no. But nevertheless, if you get into a mindset that says the only two options you have in your relationships with other people, with your peers, or in relationship even with people that you report to, if you get to the point where you say it's either a polite yes or a rude no, and those are my only two polar opposite options, you're in trouble. That's like really severe self-disempowerment, because I mean, first of all, you get bound to say polite yes is a lot more anyway. But if that's the only option, how empowered are you? You become just an order taker. And what you want to be in your relationships and even with your superiors in an institution is you want to move up the value chain so that you can become a trusted advisor. Well, how do you do that? Well, you're not going to do it. I mean, maybe at first you say yes to just show that you're competent, show that you're on their side, but then at some point you need to learn how to become an effective negotiator. to be able to speak in terms of the other person's interest, for example, to say, when they ask you something, yes, I'd be happy to do that. I can see how that would help you to achieve X, Y, and Z. But let me talk about what I think might be an even better use of my time that would help you to achieve what you're trying to do. Let's have a conversation, and you enter into negotiation. So I think that it's discovering that there's this third option that is so critical in being able to apply essentialism interpersonally and in teams and even with superiors.
Are there specific words that you would advise someone to use when they're trying to negotiate, or even maybe when they're saying no? Are there certain words that you have found to be helpful to have more of a graceful no, or attempt to have that third option?
Yeah, I mean, something that happened to me that I think is really interesting. Actually, I have it here somewhere. This is a little note that I received. This is from my daughter. I was trying to persuade her to read a book this one day. She reads lots of books, so she was not against that, but she had already commitments. And here we are, a pretty classic power differential, right? Like, as the dad, there's a variety of levers I could use to try and make her life difficult. If she really doesn't want to do this, I could certainly raise my voice, or I could certainly try to, all these things. If she had only two items, polite yes, rude no, she might say a polite yes, whatever, but she's a teenager at this time, so she might have just opted the rude no. Instead, so we had a conversation where it came to my office here, and she slipped this note under my door. It's been laminated by someone I was sharing this with. They wanted to protect it for me. Here's how she responded. You're looking for words, you see, for what to say. She said, I already expressed my unwillingness to read this book, but I'm willing to make a counteroffer. I am not willing to read it all in one day today, but I'd be happy to explore the possibility of reading it in the future over the course of a few weeks. I believe it would be best to wait till the end of my literature assignment. If you would like me to read this book in place of a separate assignment and over the course of a few weeks, I'm sure that can be made possible.
Wow.
Yeah, she's 14 when she wrote that.
Oh my goodness.
And I think that's like a small but real masterclass in the words.
Yes.
There is the polite no. There is the let's talk about the trade-offs. Let's admit them. In the name of being nice and respectful, we can't just completely ignore or violate principles of like honesty. Like when we say yes to everyone and everything, we are violating honesty in the act. I've been to meetings myself, and not a few, in which people talk about a number of things that we're all going to go and do. And people say, yes, yes, and it's all this commitment, and yes, yes, yes. And people are so non-committal, really, that nobody even writes down the list. Like, no one believes it's really all going to happen. It's just this facade. Yes, yes, oh, we should do that, and you should do that, and I should do this, and we should do it. And we just go away and carry on with the day. As we remember the principle of honesty, its vital role in human relations, we'll also recognize that we need to not simply say yes without thinking about it. So it's this combination of courage and kindness that allows you to create the psychological safety to be able to have these kinds of conversations. And Eve, I think, in this little note, captured it well.
Well, I hope your next book is on parenting. That's
It would be fun to do that. Wouldn't it be fun to have a essentialism book on parenting? Lots of people have suggested it. I've suggested to my wife, Anna, that either she does it or we do it together, and it would be fun to do at some point.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Perfect example. And I have, over the years, I mentioned early in my marriage, I've over the years become a lot more comfortable saying no. And I have also started to respect people more who are willing to say no. I think that I often have also people in my life who will say it's kind of semi-committal, but then at the last minute it's a no. And I would just rather just be honest up front. I can't do this, and you can explain it. You can be honest about it. In fact, I had a boss who was fantastic, a great leader, and she would stay pretty late in the office. And I needed to get out of the office at 5:36 because I had a little bit of a commute. And every day I felt like I was saying no to the office to say yes to going home. And I worried about that every day. I almost had to sneak out of the office because I was worried that there was this negative view of me. And then at the very end, when she was doing our final review, she said to me, "Cal, I respected that so much." And it blew my mind. This whole time I'm thinking that she was looking down on me for, not being a team player, not staying late. Ultimately, she respected that. And I think sometimes we have this false view that people view us as any number of ways. But really, I think a lot of times people respect us when our no is our no and our yes is our yes.
Yeah, and I just add to that like, if you go back to the hospital story, right? I don't know the answer to the question because I didn't experiment with that.
Yeah.
Like if I had just gone, oh yeah, I'm in the hospital, of course I can't go, I might have got a perfectly positive response. But because of the fear of it, fear of missing out, the fear of, I don't know, fear of something, I only know what happened by trying to say yes to both. So in our own lives, I think we have to experiment with this and learn, explore what happens. One of the principles that I liked when I was doing the research for Essentialism was the idea of a reverse pilot. The pilot's trying something out and seeing what the effects are, and a reverse pilot is to not do something and to see what the effect is. And you're going to learn stuff in reverse pilots. You're going to learn whether people even notice something, whether it's even a problem. I worked with an executive one time who, newly into his role, wasn't convinced that his predecessor's creation of a bi-weekly report for the rest of the executive team was being valued. It took about 50% of the resources of his whole department to generate this every 2 weeks. And so he just tried to experiment. He's like, okay, we're not going to do it. Let's just try it not doing it for 2 weeks. And we'll see if anybody notices. And no one said anything. So they said, okay, we'll do it for 4 weeks and we'll just see if anybody notices. No one ever asked it. So he got a 50% rebate of his entire organization's resources just by experimenting. If it had been a big problem, he could have, of course, had a discussion about it, including, yes, we'll do it again, because it's clearly valuable. And what is most valuable? What did you really miss? But just to keep doing everything that's been done in the past and just presume it all needs to still be done is the way that systems become ever more complicated and more expensive to run. And I frankly do think the military is a pretty great illustration of this, often.
Yeah, I agree. Greg, I wanted to ask you, so you wrote the book, it's published, and one of the things about a book is it's published, and it's not something you can easily edit, I would imagine. I'm curious, is there anything now that you've had this in the public for a number of years now, is there anything that you would add to it, subtract, change? I'm just curious now that you've had some time to marinate on it.
Yeah, there's two things. One is what I just said about negotiation. I would have emphasized that more and tried to make sure that it was clear that it's not just yes or no. Even the polite and graceful no, it doesn't have to just be a graceful no, it can be a negotiation around. The point isn't the no, the point is what's essential. The point is to have a discussion with your boss and to say with your file leader and to say, look, what's the ratio of time you want me spending on value creation? In fact, I just was talking to Cal Newport for an interview for the podcast that I know that I'm just launching the Essentialism podcast, and he gave this great sort of way to have this conversation, and he said, look, you can go to your manager and you can say, look, what's the ratio between value creation work I'm doing and then just sort of keep the lights on work that I'm currently doing? And I would think it's a decent way of thinking about essential and non-essential work.
Yeah.
In the way that I define it in Essentialism. It's like the stuff that's really going to push the needle forward, actually help us rise to another level of contribution. There's that kind of work. And then there's the stuff that's like, yeah, okay, well, we just carry on. And so you have that discussion, you agree on it. Okay, well, maybe it's 50-50, let's say at first you think. And then you go away and you find that 95% of your time is being spent on just maintenance, keep the lights on, reacting, responding to people. And only 5% is actually helping us to go forward and, create that kind of breakthrough. And so then you're having a positive negotiation, an essential negotiation, because it's not just, hey, no, I don't want to do it, or I'm overwhelmed, or, I don't like this work. No, that's nothing it's not whatsoever the conversation. You are trying to make sure that you are utilized at the highest point of contribution. You're doing the most valuable work, so that you can actually help your file leader and your internal customers to be able to make the very, to get the best results possible. So that's one thing I would say differently, that I would want to emphasize differently.
Would you mind sharing the other?
Yeah, I am happy. I felt like I was monologuing there.
No, I thought that was great.
The number two is, it's not so much what I wrote in the book, but a perception people seem to have got sometimes from it. I'll explain the difference. The assumption I've heard sometimes from people is like, well, actually somebody literally said to me, they said, I really like essentialism, but it should come with a warning. And the warning is, this will be the hardest thing that you will ever do. Like, it's hard. This is hard. Essentialism is hard. It's good. It's great. It's important, but it's hard. Right. And I just absorbed that feedback actually when I heard that. I thought, I should tell people that. Well, essentialism is really important, but it's really hard. And what I didn't know as I was doing that is how much of a stereotype idea I was fitting into. The stereotype is that anything worth doing is exceptionally hard. Like it's going to take momentous effort to do anything that matters. And it's actually shocking to me how deep set that assumption is. But as I have proceeded in my journey, and in fact, it is written in Essentialism, the final quarter of the book presumes that there are easier ways to build systems to make execution not that kind of painful, hard experience. But I've gone much more deeply into that now over the last few years and working with people. And my conclusion is that much of that is just a false assumption. And it's so deep set, I can hardly express it. People just accept it as the truth. Well, the reason I do X that's trivial is because it's easy. And the reason I don't do the essential work is because it's hard. And it's as simple as that. But I think you can make things easy and essential. Yes, we do the easy stuff. I'm fine, accept that. So let's make essential the easiest things to do. And this is, I think, truly possible. And I wish that, I don't know if I wish I could change the book exactly, but I definitely want to emphasize and illustrate that going forward. To be able to really help people to discover that they can do this. I can do this. Being an essentialist is easier than being a non-essentialist. I believe it.
I wonder, have you found that it's harder for certain personality types? Because we all are very different. I think that's one thing I've discovered with my wife is through Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram, any number of different ways you learn about yourself and you learn about others. Have you discovered that certain personality types find this to be easier than others?
I don't know that that's the case because essentialism isn't saying that you ought to be like somebody else. It's saying, well, you figure out what the right thing is for you to be doing, given your personality traits, given your your unique and essential mission in life. I mean, just ripping just for a second, a little more on this idea of easy versus hard. This is a biblical reference, but you know, as I've started to share this clarification around essential things can be easy. Yeah, sometimes people feel quite uncomfortable with that idea. It's you know, it feels like an oxymoron to them. Essential things can be the easiest things. I mean, it's exciting, it's really, and what's the group that came over originally? The Mayflower,
the Pilgrims, the
Pilgrims. Yeah, the Pilgrims came over, and then there's a particular Christian philosophy at the time.
Puritanism.
Puritanism.
Yes.
Puritanism. It's maybe tied back to a sort of Puritan idea that hard equals good.
Yeah.
That sacrifice and pain is righteous.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you frame it that way, then easy is wicked.
Yes.
And wrong. And so you can go a long, long time with that core assumption keeping you in, you know, basically, frankly, keeping you away from doing important things. Because, my goodness, they're hard, and we're wired to do what's easy, so we'll just go to the trivial easy instead of the vital hard. And so as I went to study that biblically, I studied every reference to ease and related words. Right, like what comes up? I mean, you can finish the sentence for me. My yoke is
easy.
My yoke is easy.
Yes.
My burden is
light. Yes. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't have to like stretch to the edges of, you know, of the Christian canon or to some obscure reference by somebody observing something. I didn't have to go to some strange interpretation of gospel to find this reference, right? It's in the Sermon on the Mount. It's in the core of the Christian canon. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. And yet I think if you spoke to most people in the church, and of course it's applicable beyond that, but just using that application for a second, I think almost everybody would describe their experience as being different to that. Church is hard. Yes. The service is hard. Doing the work is hard. And actually, it's not only that they would say that and be honest about it, it's part of what makes them good. It's part of, you know, I am sacrificial. I have sacrificed myself. So that is good. It's an evidence of my goodness that I am doing something that's painful. And look, I'm not anti-sacrifice, but I'm anti calling stuff hard that could actually be easy, especially when it's right there in the scriptures.
Yeah. No, that's so fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me, when I kind of combine essentialism with atomic habits and kind of put those two concepts together, you know, one of the things that James Clear talks about is, you know, in order to form a habit, you have to make it easy. And I do think that I think there might be some synthesis there between the two ideas of trying to create new habits that are in line with essential things in your life that allow you to live and ultimately have your highest contribution. So I think that's really great, Greg. Thanks for sharing that. And I wanted to ask you, because one of the taglines of this show is all about intentional living. And at the end, I tend to talk about how life is short. Let's make it count. And one of the things I've heard you talk about, and as we're kind of wrapping up here, is having a longer view of life. And I've heard you even talk about going beyond birth to death. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that potentially gives us the courage to live an essentialist life? And this might be the last question because I know we're running out of time here.
Yeah, look, it's we're all old news. We're all on the way out. And And you can test this in a really simple way, using the 100-year vision. You say, okay, let's go back 100 years for a second, and like, who listening to this can name first and last name of their great grandparents? Typically, it's less than 5% of any group I've actually asked this in person to, and often way less, like 1% maybe. And they're not even sure. Maybe I could or not. And then, so we're talking about the majority of people, the vast majority of people cannot name the first and last names of their great grandparents. They got 8 great grandparents. It's not like some massive amount of information. And these people are not trivially connected to us. They are, the language we speak is often because of them. The country we live in is often because of them. That's just the obvious stuff. Our DNA is directly from them. Our cultural DNA is often hugely influenced by them. So there's this tremendous impact that these people have had, and we can't even name them. And we might not even know who they are. So okay, that's like, there's all sorts to be garnered from that. But now let's just carry on with our thought experiment to go 100 years in the future, which I did one time on a flight. Made me feel really, weird, actually. Like, it was, what's it called, where you're like high up on a building and you look over and you feel, what's the word I'm looking for?
Vertigo, maybe?
Vertigo.
Or
It gave me, like, it was like intergenerational vertigo. Where I just was like, whoa, what just happened? and I just took an Excel spreadsheet out and I put every year from the moment that I was sitting there 100 years into the future. And then I put my age every year going forward, my children's age every year going forward, and then an estimate of where my grandchildren or great-grandchildren would be as well. And the vertigo came from realizing that, first of all, on a 100-year scale from this moment, of course I'm gone, right? That's obvious. You know, we're already gone way before you get to the end of that list. But not only that, what's really quite awful at first is the discovery that, like, my children are completely gone too. 100 years in the future, they're not around. My grandchildren are probably gone. And my great-grandchildren are actually getting old. So within 100 years of now, my great-grandchildren could easily have the same relationship with me as I have with my great-grandparents, which is that I'm forgotten, it's done. Okay, so this breaking of birth till death thinking, which is a sort of metal box that limits our understanding of who we are and what matters. When we burst that, we discover two things at the same time. They're two sides of the same coin, same insight. One is, at first, seems depressing, but then it's actually deeply inspiring. The depressing part is what I already illustrated. They will not remember us. So this whole idea of legacy, that's what it's all about, legacy. It's like, that might be overrated. You might be putting a lot of effort on something that doesn't deliver very much value, say it that way. Because even as we mentioned John Adams and the Founding Fathers, most people, even those that care about the Founding Fathers and have read about them and so on, cannot come close to even naming all of the people that signed the Declaration of Independence. So if you don't remember your great-grandparents or the signers of the Declaration of Independence, the people are not remembering you, right? That's not your future. That's the depressing part, or it can be for some people. The second side of it, what's inspiring, is that impact outlasts memory. 100 years from now, yeah, whether they remember is not fine, whatever, it doesn't matter. Be released from that. But they will be impacted by the choices we make right now. So making the next choice that I make with the perspective in mind that my decision will have tremendous impact for people who don't even know me gives me great responsibility to make this decision wisely, to try to focus on what investment will help. It's an anonymous way of living because eventually we're all going to be anonymous. You get rid of the ego that keeps us trapped into trying to make decisions that make us the center of the story. get rid of that, be released from that, and then you just get to live your mission. Do what matters, and your contribution is expanded immensely and actually blesses many lives. So it's an interesting paradox, but one that I think really matters.
Wow. Well, with that inspiring thought, we'll leave it at that. Greg, real quick, tell us about your podcast as we're wrapping up here.
I'm delighted to be able to finally have a way to communicate directly with people through a podcast. For years, the only thing people have really been able to do is read the book and then reread it. And honestly, that's often what people say they do, is a way to re-energize themselves around what is essential, even reading it every year. But now we have this chance, starting in June, every Monday, to be able to inject this ounce of essentialism into our thinking as we start the week. And the conversations I've had so far, the first, as I say, will drop at the beginning of June, but they've been so inspiring to me. And I genuinely see the need in my own life once a week to have this, chance. And so what I would invite people to do is subscribe wherever you subscribe to podcasts, but also find a design partner who can listen as well with you. And so then the conversation continues with you after you've listened, and we can really build and grow this community of people who care about investing in what really matters. So yeah, it's called Essentialism with Greg McKeown, and we'll start every Monday in June.
I'm so excited. I've already subscribed, and guys, go check it out because it's an incredible continuation of the great work that Greg has already done with the book. Greg, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your life and the great work you continue to do. I pray for you and your family as you all continue to navigate this COVID-19 and the work that you continue to do. Thank you so much.
It's so much my pleasure. God bless you as well.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening today, and thank you to Greg for sharing those insights with us. I've personally found Greg's work to be refreshing and meaningful in my effort to live a more intentional and purpose-filled life. Greg said, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else or something else will. He also described what he calls the success paradox. You and I, we experience success, or our organizations experience success. This leads to more options and opportunities, which then requires more selectivity. We face more options and opportunities than ever before in history. And to add to that challenge, many of these options are good, but we must decide what is best, what is truly essential. And as we learn to decipher what is essential and what is not essential, a critical part of executing on what is essential is the courage to say no, or to have honest negotiations. Greg's daughter demonstrated so well for us how we can be both courageous and kind in how we negotiate. Be honest about the trade-offs of any decision. Saying no allows you to say yes to something more essential. And by definition, saying yes means you have said no to other options. So as you head out, may we be people who think hard about what is essential and non-essential, and have the courage and the kindness to pursue only the essential. If you enjoyed this, friends, please share it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe so you get each episode we release. And help us impact more people by rating or reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can just type in my name, Cal Walters, and it'll pop up. Also, please subscribe to Greg's new podcast, Essentialism, and pick up his book if you haven't already. You will not be disappointed, I promise. I love you all. I'm rooting for you. Remember, life is short, so let's go make it count today, friends.